So for anybody who is out there, I'm going to just briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to have Margaret introduce herself. My name is Gordon Gooding. I'm one of the therapists at Gooding Wellness and at Long Island Teletherapy. We have a private practice here in Cold Spring Harbor, and we work with individuals of all ages, young people and singles and married couples and a little bit of everything. And Margaret is one of our amazing therapists who I've known for, I mean, if we were old, I'd say
Like 10
forever.
years, like just a
It's like
little bit
10
of
years.
time.
It's not going to be like 20 something years. It's going to
No,
be
it's like
like, no,
about 10.
it just, yeah, just a few months I've known her.
Yeah.
And maybe you just want to introduce yourself quickly, my
I'm
friend.
Margaret Lorenz. I'm a therapist working online at Long Island Teletherapy. I work with married people, couples, singles. I do a lot of work with people navigating relationships.
Awesome. I think it's a great transition to our topic tonight, which
Yes.
I know you picked out, and I think is fascinating. I think it's such an important topic, and our topic tonight is really about facing a toxic relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
I wanted to kind of hopefully let me just maybe start. I know we talked about this a little bit. There's a toxic relationship and there's an abusive relationship, right? There's all
Right.
different levels of different relationships. I'm just wondering if you could maybe help specify when we talk about a toxic relationship, how do you see that?
Well, today I wanted to talk about a toxic relationship that wasn't necessarily abusive, but sometimes
Because they're
people
two
get
different things. Yeah,
right. Well, a toxic relationship could
can
evolve
be.
into
Yeah,
something abusive, but what I really primarily wanted to talk about, because I've had a lot of people come and and I guess I've been dealing with this a lot. You start off in a relationship, it seems like it's going somewhere, or they've been married for a period of time and things have just kind of deteriorated over time. And you can find yourself in a position like this where you're always looking back to the way the relationship had been and wanting to get
Mm.
back there and almost pruning your own actions with the hope of getting back
Like
to that other place.
reliving a different part of the relationship, right? Kind of
Right.
like going back to the time where it wasn't so toxic, or where you were getting your needs met and their needs met and everything was good, and trying to reliving there as opposed to being present in what's going on currently, correct?
Yes, and you almost fall out of your needs are kind of let go, and you're trying to feed the needs of the other person or walking on eggshells. So maybe your time together is more pleasant, and there's less friction or conflict. Relationships like this can be marked with derision and negativity, and it can be or just coldness, where maybe the couple was very connected at the beginning, and you know the there was a lot of positivity, but now there's mixed messages and the other person's pulling away and you don't know why. So they've been talking a lot
And
about
it's
that.
it's something that kind of too, I've seen it when we talk. I love the word toxic. I think it describes it so well, but it also talks about how it builds, it changes over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that idea of like, all relationships change over the course of it, right? Over the longevity of a relationship, the change, and could be good, could be bad, right? And it's
Right.
like, but our fundamental needs is it, I guess to use the pun, is it toxic? Is something about this relationship hurting me, being hurtful, right?
Right. And you can feel it in your body sometimes. And, where the client might sit and kind of meditate on how they're feeling in their body, because you can start like focusing on working out, or, just rushing around, keeping yourself busy. If it's a marriage, you can focus on your kids or on something else and really not address what's happening in the marriage, and almost convince yourself it'll work itself out over time. You know,
But it becomes like looking for other outside distractions. I mean, we don't find happiness here in the relationship,
hmm
then maybe, I look for it's like another form of codependency. Maybe the kids will make me happy if I do this, or if I exercise enough, or if my career, if I could just get to this next level in my career, I'll be happy. And maybe that'll fix this other thing, right?
Right,
As opposed
right.
to looking at ours, a relationship as an individual, as its own entity, really, right?
Right. If I could focus on, we're going to move to a bigger house, or we're going to move here. If I change something, everything will kind of come together.
Yeah, and I got to
Yeah.
tell you, so I've seen so many relationships struggle with that. It's like, I mean, individuals too. It's like the next thing is going to make us happy. When we get the house, when we get the apartment, when the baby comes, or when our
Hmm.
career is on this certain project, that's when we'll be happy. As opposed to like, how do we really find what pleases us and what makes us safe and happy now, right?
Right.
To
How
kind of
can
be like
we?
in this moment right here, because there's always going to be the next thing, right? That's that
Right.
delayed gratification. If only, I call it the if onlys. If only this would happen. If only that would happen. But
Hmm.
what do I need to be really happy in my relationship right now?
Right. Right. And how can we be work as a team together? Or how can I acknowledge the fact that I'm really pulling a relationship along and I'm not getting enough from my partner, and they're not doing, or they're not actively engaged, and we need to have a conversation about that.
So could you talk a little bit, maybe, or maybe I can too, just to get, excuse me, I'm stumbling. How would one know, like, because these changes I think sometimes happen subtly over a relationship. How do you,
Yes.
like, when you stop and think, if anyone's out there watching or rewatching this, it's like, what are some questions we might ask ourselves to know, is like, is this relationship toxic, right?
Hmm. Okay. So if you feel like, what I've seen in dating relationships, let's say, is the other person's pulling away. They're not as available. It's like they call it soft ghosting. They're slowly moving away.
Mm,
Maybe they're a little engaged, and the other person has a hard time figuring out where they're at. Like, what's going on? Are you pulling away because you are busy at work, because you have other things going on, because you're depressed, or are you pulling away because you're trying to leave this slowly? And there's a discomfort in addressing it and in bringing it up. So instead, someone might start cooking more meals at home, trying to get the other person to come out for exciting adventures to try and reignite the spark, but there's not a conversation between the two. Um, in deeper relationships, there can be derision over time, where the other person becomes kind of negative about their partner, a lot of complaining, or finding fault with them, and the other person starts to kind of walk around on eggshells, almost like trying to fit a certain mold so they'll feel accepted and loved again by their partner. There might not be enough repair gestures, where you could be in a rough spot with your partner, you could be fighting, but a repair gesture would be still showing them care even if they've annoyed you. And
mm.
some people don't know how to, when they're annoyed with their partner, still ask them if they want a cup of coffee, or ask them how their day was, in the just to show care. They build up a wall, and then that ability to show care and repair the relationship
Well,
dissipates.
yeah, and I think it's one of the things I've seen too is that we talk about all the time in relationship is how we communicate. When we don't communicate, then we slowly start pulling away, right?
Right.
So I'm feeling distance between me and my partner, so now I'm not going to make her a cup of coffee in the morning, or I'm not going to make this phone call or do something I normally do, because now I feel like I feel like they're pulling away, so I'm going to pull away. I'm going to hurt you first, right? There's like
Right.
this. As opposed to having a conversation of like, wow, I'm feeling very disconnected from you right now. Is it
Right.
me? Is it, are you feeling it too? Like having an open dialogue, like that can shift the whole thing, because sometimes, it's maybe we did something we didn't mean to, or maybe they did something, like it's always this, I always say, what is the conversation we're having in our head,
Right. And there's that level of, even in a partner relationship, there can be difficulties being vulnerable to someone that you love, to someone that you want to
Yes.
be with. And it's so important. That's where that discomfort of being vulnerable and exposing like your soft spots, that's where growth happens. And that's where you actually get closer. But it
And
can
that's
be
where
so difficult,
I think
you
also
know?
that's where real true intimacy happens. When you
Hmm.
open that soul up to say, I'm feeling like you're not into me anymore. I'm feeling like, we're not as close as we used to be. And then having a conversation from there, that kind of like, that brings about that real true connection,
Hmm.
because maybe there has been some shifting and now we're going to readjust it, or maybe one of the person's just been so preoccupied with work and that they didn't realize they pulled away. And
Right.
sometimes it's devastating for them to know that, wow, I caused my partner this pain by pulling away.
Hmm.
Right.
And to be introspective enough or to listen is so important, because how I perceive a situation might be vastly different than how you perceive a situation. That doesn't mean either one of us is lying. That just means that we need to talk and understand one another. And that's what's really important when you're trying to rebuild a relationship that's veered into toxicity. You have to be willing to listen and kind of own your stuff. you know, listen, I've gone to couples counseling myself, and you know what happens when you go and you just want to be like, and this is what's wrong. I will sit here and you will fix this person and it will be so much better.
Oh,
Uh,
see, my favorite thing is, well, she said this, but I know what she meant was like, like the idea, and I use this all the time with my clients because I also learned it in couples counseling, is like, stay out of each other's heads. Like,
yeah,
we have to have a conversation what you're actually telling me, not
right,
what I think is in your head that you don't want to tell me, but I know what it is, and you're not saying it, so I'm going to be pissed off about this thing you're not saying to me. Like, that's fear, right? That's fear based. That's me feeling insecure in my relationship and vulnerable in some ways. So I'm
yeah.
having this, made up, conversation with something that's not true. That's not in front of me, right?
Right, but it's really hard to kind of open up, listen, and own the fact that in any situation you probably have some part in it. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and that's
I
what's
know.
really difficult about going to couples counseling, because while when you go in the door you might think like I've been wronged, this should be fixed. You're going to have to, the idea of it is not to point out the flaws in your partner. The idea is to really look at yourself,
Well, and I
which
think that's,
is
when
hard.
you're talking about a toxic relationship, I think that's so key, is that when, if both partners aren't spending some sense of spending some time really being introspective and looking honestly at themselves of what is our part, and and then it's just one person's got the problem,
Hmm.
like that turns toxic, right?
Yeah.
That's not safe, that's not vulnerable, like there's a whole all that stuff like you said before. Then I remember working on eggshells, when if I'm the only problem, it gets very complicated from that point, right?
Right, right, right.
You
Right.
know,
You have to be willing to be able to see that the issues are shared and you're going to work on it together,
yeah,
and be willing to kind of put down your armor and show care and concern for the other person,
yeah.
which is,
And like
it's,
it's so hard, and it's like, it's so hard to be that vulnerable to, and especially if I guess important part of a relationship is really, can my partner let me be vulnerable? If I'm
mm-hmm,
having a bad day and I'm having, my head is telling me this story, right? This is the
right,
story. You didn't call me on the way home from work today, and this is the story going on in my head about that. That's vulnerable. Like, that's what's going to actually get us closer, right? But I have to feel safe enough to do that, and so does my partner, right? And if you don't feel that safe and you don't feel like you can do that, that I always think is kind of a little bit of a red flag to, are you with a partner who you can really bare yourself to, in terms of open up your mind, open up your thinking, opening up what are my insecurities.
right. And that's where derision, darker sarcasm becomes the issue, because if the other person feels like they're going to get torn down or mocked or made fun of for what they say, they're not going to be able to open up. And
Yeah,
again, um, you know, if you're willing to look at your own stuff and you stop doing that, you can help your partner flower.
yeah,
Not every toxic relationship or relationship that's veered into that realm is doomed. That I did want to point that out. By working on yourself, by owning your stuff, you can make it better. And maybe talking to a
absolutely.
therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I mean, I think when I remember going to couples, that was so hard to, like, Oh God, I have a couple embarrassing stories about that, of just being
Yeah.
so like, and learning that it was me
Mm-hmm.
was painful. It was a little embarrassing, but you know what? It was the best thing to happen to us.
Yeah.
It brought us to that next level. So it's like, what is that old, one of my meditation teachers I love, they talk about pain and resistance equals suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the resistance of the change. If we accept
Right.
we're in pain, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we will be okay. We won't have to suffer. We address
Right.
the pain,
Right.
right? It's like if you're broke, you have a broken arm, and you don't go to the hospital and you don't set the arm, you're going to suffer with that arm for a long time,
Right.
right? If you get the arm fixed, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be very pleasurable, but it's going to heal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same thing goes with our emotions and our partnerships like that.
100%. If you sit rather than keep yourself busy with your friends, go to tennis 5 days a week, or work extra hours so you're avoiding each other. If you sit with the pain and kind of work through it together, things will get better. Not only for the relationship, but you as a person. There's internal growth that happens.
Yeah.
So I think, and I really like what you said, and I use this too, where you said something along the lines of, when you said this to me, this is the story I made up in my head about it, because that is such a great technique for having the other person then put down their boundaries and really hear you, because you're not blaming them. You're allowing them, you're allowing yourself to hear that this is what you've kind of made up in your head. This is how you saw it, and that's how they're interpreting it. It's not a blame thing. I really think that's a great
Yeah.
way
I
to
mean, it's
handle it.
one of those, I'm sure, like in some couples therapy, when they talk about mirroring, or they talk about, and Harville Hendricks talks
Yeah.
about that, like, having couples kind of repeat back what you heard,
Right.
and my wife and I always have this joke now, because we've done some of this work of, I know what you said, but this is what I heard.
Right.
I
No.
said you can't go with me on Saturday because you have a commitment. But what I heard was you're pissed off at me for some reason.
Right.
Right,
Right.
right. And then
Yeah.
there opens up that conversation of why would you feel that? That opens up that whole dialogue of what someone says and what we actually hear.
Right. And that idea also with Harlan Hendricks of and why would this make sense? Why would you go there, that I didn't want, like, trying to be, oh, I can see why you would think that I didn't want you were angry at me because we didn't spend last Saturday together, and this is the second Saturday, where you try and be a little tune in to where your partner's at. So I
Yeah.
think that that's also very
Yeah,
helpful.
it's that avoiding though. I mean, I see it with couples so much, is that once they finally face it, and not even couples, I've done it too. Like, if there's something between you and you avoid it and you overwork, or you do all these things to kind of work around the problem. It's so much more energy than just sitting down and saying, this is what's going on with me,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And that is the sign of a good relationship. It's not like we're always going to get along with our partners, but you know that's safety. And toxic relationships don't bring about safety and security.
Right. And I think that being able to be vulnerable and creating a safe space so your partner can share with you is just so important. And being
So
brave
important.
enough to do it, really, because so many times we just want the other person to read our minds, or, how many times have you heard, well, they should just know.
Oh my God, absolutely. You should know that by now. I have a conversation all the time. Well,
Yeah.
my wife did this, or my husband did this again. They should know.
It's so obvious, but
I know.
you
Well,
know,
it's that, I always joke the should, anytime you're shoulding, you're shoulding all over yourself, right? Again,
right.
like, but that's not what it is, like if they do, our partners can only make any decisions or do things based on what information we give them directly, right?
Right. Because so many of us are also coming into relationships with whatever happened in our homes or whatever we saw growing up. So it's not like it's just this should just naturally happen. We should just naturally be able to figure this out, because some of us didn't have great role
Role
models,
models, yeah.
and didn't see it work out in an appropriate fashion. And we carry that into our present relationship,
Yeah. And we
so
listen when we continue patterns that we saw in our families, and you know, and your partner's going to continue patterns they saw, and that might have worked for their, our parents' relationship or my partner's parents' relationship, but now we're two different people in totally different circumstances. So if it isn't working, we have to find a way to relook at it, right?
Right. Right. So
And
kind
it
of,
all starts with communication. It all starts with letting someone know what's going on up here, that, what the story I'm telling myself about my partner.
yeah. Yeah. It starts with communication and really being aware of what's going on in our own heads and sharing that. And it's hard. I can really appreciate that it's hard to be vulnerable, but that's,
Yeah.
I had someone, where you get to where you're, where you come to your edge, where you're not in pain, but you're just uncomfortable. That's where all the growth happens. That's where all
Yeah.
the good stuff happens and you evolve.
I don't know about you, but I have found, whether it's relationships or anything, the more open I am, the more, in terms of whether hearing a partner or hearing something at work or to anything in life, I'm at more peace. Once I start saying no and I shut down into this, like I'm in my cave, you can't get me. Like
Hmm.
it's so much more uncomfortable for me.
Right.
Even if it might hurt that someone says, Gooding, you didn't do this right or whatever. Like, all right, that might hurt, but it's so much easier to take that in and do something with that, as opposed to, no, that's not true, and get into this combative, like, my peace of mind is worth more than that. I'd rather be happy and wrong than pissed off and, right and pissed off.
Right. Or taking ownership of whatever it is rather than running from it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
avoiding, running, hiding from it. It's because it's just always then looming, you
And it's
know?
never as big as we make it out to be.
No.
It's never that, whatever it is, whatever it's about, talking to somebody or bringing up a difficult, it's never, the story is always much, catastrophized in my head, where it's never as bad as I think it is.
Right. Right. We're always imagining the worst possible outcome. So,
So if you working with someone and they start to feel like their relationship might be toxic or their needs aren't being met, is there any suggestions you have for them of where to begin? Obviously, talking to a good therapist, talking to a good friend, getting some other somebody's perspective.
mhm.
Um, any thoughts about? Oh, no, because you've done this before with a lot of people. So
Right. Well, first, in a long-term relationship, I do use that phrase of, well, this and this happened, and this is what I made up in my head about it, just to try and start down a better road. We also talk a lot about repair gestures if you're in a conflict, to try and help the other person to open up, to own the fact, or take a step back from, one of the other therapists here also does this with me, where, well, take a step back and with Carmela. So take a step back. Do you really think that they would do that? And if I get out of my own discomfort
way,
way, I can look and see that, maybe it's not really what's going on in my head. This is not typical to them. And I should try to put down my armor and talk a little bit more. So to try and
yeah,
to be aware of your own stuff. And then, really evaluating how you feel in the relationship, what your body's telling you, if you're feeling tense, if you're feeling like you're trying to be something you're not, you need to discuss that as well. And in other newer relationships, maybe where the other person is sending mixed messages and you're not really willing to let go of it because maybe in the beginning it was great and you're really very attracted to this person and you want to be with them, and they keep sending you like breadcrumbs or stringing you along a little bit, really deciding if it's likely to happen or if this is working for you. If there's not a
it's
commitment or another, if you're striving for something that might not be for you.
that's funny. It's the kind of goes the question I usually have for most people who are struggling in a relationship is, that's the question I usually ask them, and it's, regardless if it's been together 30 years or they've been together 6 months, like, what's working for you in this relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And you'd be surprised. Sometimes people are just don't. Um, Sorry, I'm letting my dog in, as you can tell. It was. Um, Sometimes we don't realize until you stop and think about it. Like, relationships are give and take. and sometimes it thinks, oh, we're just giving, 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 give, but we need to,
Yeah.
so
Right.
if whether it's been together 6 months, like, what are you taking from this relationship? You
Right.
shouldn't just be taking, but you also just shouldn't be giving.
Right.
Right?
No, you know what? And
And the
that's when I
toxic
talk
ones,
about,
sometimes you're always just giving to it, and you're not getting anything back and validation back.
I talk about that sometimes too, because we celebrate, which is, giving is terrific, and being self-sacrificing is good too. But there's a lesson to be learned in receiving. And if you're only giving, because some people have guilt, that they put on on taking or receiving, and or they don't expect it, or they, it's so complicated for some people to receive. But there's a lesson there for the person who's giving to you, and for you to feel what it's like to receive. It's
Yes.
really very, very necessary. That's, it's a
That's a full
balance.
relationship. That's,
Yeah.
because as it being in a relationship, it feels good to give to my partner, and it also feels good to receive, right? Whatever
Right.
that love, validation, you name it, because it has, that's what's fulfilling. I mean, toxic ones are,
Yeah. And
it's
if you're
just being
just
given away. You're giving away all your energy, right? And it's
right.
draining. You said it before. It's draining. It's depleting. It's exhausting, right?
Right. And I've also, if it's not working, you have to take some of that energy, love, support, encouragement that you're just giving to somebody else who's maybe not giving back, and you have to give it to yourself. What would you say to your friend or your sibling if they were in a similar situation?
Stepping out of it. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
If you were if you were your Go ahead. What?
yeah. No, I had a meme that said, that I read, like, you can be the total package. I saw it online. You can be the total package delivered to the wrong address. You could have everything, but you're just not in the right place or time.
Yeah, that's a great. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
We're gonna do something with that with Long Island teletherapy.
Well,
So
I could send it to you.
send that over to me. Well,
I took a
that was good.
screenshot. Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. Well, very good. Listen, I think there's so much more we could talk about with this, but we're gonna have to. I have to run in a few minutes.
Okay.
Um,
You're
but
always
just
busy,
in,
Gordon.
I
You're doing
well,
a
you
lot of
are
stuff.
too. Listen, you got kids coming home in a few. I got to see them, and you know, um,
Oh,
take
thank
care
you.
of got to take care of my relationship.
Yes, you have
So
to feed your relationship. That's good.
exactly. Don't It's not all about Gordon. That's what I've been told, right? It's you
No,
gotta
it's
go
not.
both ways. That's what I heard this wise mind said on
Yeah,
you know.
you have to feed that relationship. Good. Yeah.
Absolutely. So obviously, if anybody needs, we are available, on longislandteletherapy.com. It's an easy way to get in touch with Margaret or myself, and I hope we'll keep doing these, my friend. I always enjoy doing them.
Yep. It's good. It's good. So, all right. That sounds
All
like,
right,
well, you take care of the dog.
She's in now.
All right.
That's another relationship where she just needs from me. That's I
But
know,
she
but that
gives a
might be
lot
another
too.
topic for another night for that
Yeah.
dog and I.
She does a lot too. All right. I'll
All
talk
right,
to you soon.
guys. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Margaret. I'll talk
Thank
to you soon.
Okay.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye, everybody.
I don't know.